All right, everyone, let's get started. My name is Alex, and you are on the Classic Cars Roast channel. Right, no more beating around the bush. We need to have a serious and probably uncomfortable conversation about the 1960 Plymouth Fury. This car, a prime example of the malaise era, is like a bad hangover from the golden age of muscle. You'd think a car named Fury would pack a punch, but oh boy, if only it lived up to its name. Let's break this down. The market for classic cars is really heating up right now, and what's shocking is that the Plymouth Fury is somehow snagging some hefty auction prices. We're talking restored models fetching between $30,000 to $60,000, and for what? A car that was once tossed aside like yesterday's news. Now, if you're on the hunt for a classic ride, you better be prepared to sift through a lot of junk. This model was made in a time when build quality was taking a nosedive, and that's putting it lightly. If you come across one with a repainted body, it's an immediate no. Game over. The original paint is usually long gone, and what you'll find is a sad patchwork of repairs on a car that should have been left in the past. First impressions? It's a striking car, no doubt, with its distinct tail fins and that pronounced grille. But don't let those looks fool you. Under the hood, you might find one of three engines, but good luck if you score the one with any decent power. The 230 horsepower from the B318 cubic inch displacement engine is laughable when you compare it to the glory days of muscle. Even the RB361 Golden Commando with 305 horsepower is just a weak imitation of what could have been. And let's not even start on the fact that the compression ratio is a miserable 7.6 to 1. What happened to the high-compression V8s that ruled the roads before 1970? You'll want to keep an eye out for those common rust spots in the front fenders and along the rocker panels. Trust me, if you find one with solid metal, it's like finding a unicorn. And if you're thinking about the interior, prepare for disappointment. Those bench seats are about as comfortable as a park bench, and the push-button transmission? It's more of a gimmick than a feature. So, what's the bottom line here? If you're looking for a classic car with character, the Plymouth Fury may seem appealing at first glance, but the reality is far from glamorous. You've got to be ready to deal with its flaws if you choose to dive into this market. Would I buy one? Honestly, only if I stumbled upon a pristine example at a steal of a price. Otherwise, I'd keep my distance. When you think of the 1960s, what comes to mind? The birth of rock and roll? The rise of the muscle car? Unfortunately, the 1960 Plymouth Fury tells a tale of a different kind, one that encapsulates the decline of American automotive ambition, characterized by what we now call the malaise era. This period, which really began to rear its ugly head in the late 1960s, marked the end of an era where high-compression V8 engines were king. By the time we hit 1970, we were staring down the barrel of a dismal future for performance cars. And the Fury was one of the early warning signs that things were about to go downhill. The Fury's second generation, produced between 1959 and 1961, is an embodiment of this transition. Sure, it has its charm, but when you dig deeper, it's clear that the engineers were already compromising. The engine options are a prime example. While you could get a 330 horsepower RB383 Sonoramic Commando, the average Joe was often relegated to the paltry 230 horsepower of the B318. That's right, a pathetic horsepower level that would barely get you out of your own way. What a stark contrast to the glory days of high performance, where you could expect power and torque that would leave you breathless. Then there's the question of build quality. Enter the absurdly thick door seals, which were more of a band-aid for poor panel gaps than a feature. It's like they knew the craftsmanship was slipping and decided to cover it up. If you're expecting a finely tuned machine, this is not the car for you. The dashboard? Symmetrical and stylish, sure, but those push-button transmission controls are notorious for causing electrical issues. Good luck finding a working one that doesn't resemble a game of Russian roulette with your wiring. And let's not forget the design quirks. Sure, the tail fins were larger and more pronounced than in 1959, but they also scream, "Look at me!" in a way that borders on desperate. The colors were vibrant, but they can't hide the fact that the Fury was losing its identity. It was stuck between the golden era of American muscle and the impending doom of the Malays. In terms of handling, forget about it. Cars from the mid-60s to early 70s had a grace to them that this Fury just can't touch. Instead of a confident drive, you get a lumbering beast, struggling with its own weight and lack of engineering finesse. What were they thinking? The big iron market may be heating up, but this car is a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. To wrap it up, the 1960 Plymouth Fury is a fascinating yet tragic chapter in automotive history, a car that reflects the decline of innovation and the slow death of true performance. If you're thinking about adding one to your collection, just remember, it's only original once, and that may be the only thing that keeps this car from being completely forgotten. Look at this beast, the 1960 Plymouth Fury. The exterior design is where it gets interesting, and if you ask me, it's a mixed bag of striking beauty and questionable choices. Let's start with those tailfins. I mean, they're larger and more pronounced than the ones on the 1959 model, which is saying something. These fins scream, "Look at me," in a way that is both charming and slightly obnoxious. They give the car a sense of presence that you just don't get from today's cookie-cutter designs. But here's the kicker. While the fins might grab your attention, the overall body lines have a certain awkwardness about them, especially when you consider how sleek and aggressive cars were before the Malays era kicked in. Now, the grille. Oh boy, the grille. The 1960 model features a more pronounced design with horizontal lines and that centrally located Plymouth badge, which is a nice touch, but it feels like they were trying a bit too hard to stand out. I can't help but think they could have done better. It's almost as if they were trying to compensate for something, maybe the fact that under the hood, they were losing their edge with pitiful horsepower numbers. The bumpers are another story. They're large chrome affairs with integrated guards that seem to shout, "We're trying to be tough." But let's be honest, they're more about style than substance. They're heavy and look great, but good luck finding one that hasn't been dinged up or rusted away. Speaking of rust, keep an eye out for common rust spots on the front fenders, lower door sections, and rocker panels. If you're buying one of these and it doesn't have a clean body, consider it a hard pass. And the color options? Talk about a palette that's all over the place. You've got sand dune white, shell pink, and spring green. Sure, they're unique, but I can't help but feel like they're trying to appeal to a demographic that just doesn't exist anymore. The colors are definitely a reflection of the time, but they can also come off as a bit garish. Let's not forget the dashboard, which features a symmetrical design with a centrally mounted speedometer. It's a quirky touch that matches the overall vibe of the car, distinctive yet a bit dated. Overall, the exterior of the 1960 Plymouth Fury has a brutal charm. It's unapologetic in its character, and while it may not be everyone's cup of tea, it definitely turns heads. But for me, if it's not in pristine condition, it's a hard pass. All right, folks, time to confront the elephant in the room, the interior of the 1960 Plymouth Fury. Now, I don't know about you, but when I step into a classic car, I expect a sense of nostalgia, a feeling that takes me back to the golden age of automotive design. Unfortunately, the Fury's interior is a mixed bag of charm and sheer disappointment. So, what about the dashboard? Let's take a closer look. The dashboard layout is about as symmetrical as a math problem gone wrong. The centrally mounted speedometer and gauges might have looked futuristic back in the day, but they now scream, "I'm a relic." The push-button automatic transmission controls located on the left side? Sure, it's a quirky touch, but it's more frustrating than functional. You'll find yourself wishing for a simple gear lever instead of playing a game of musical buttons. As for comfort, let's just say the bench seats are standard, and while you can opt for bucket seats, they might not be the ultimate in luxury you're hoping for. The seats feel more like something you'd find in a cheap motel than a classic muscle car, hard and flat with about as much support as a soggy cardboard box. And the smell? Oh boy. If you're lucky, you might get a hint of that sweet vintage leather or vinyl aroma. But more often than not, it's a strange mix of musty air and old upholstery that leaves you questioning your life choices. And let's not even get started on the electrical issues. Problems with the dashboard wiring are notorious. You could end up with a dashboard that lights up like a Christmas tree for all the wrong reasons, which is just pathetic for a car that once roamed the streets with pride. My biggest concern has always been the rust spots too. I mean, if you're not careful, the front fenders and lower sections of the doors will rot away faster than your enthusiasm for this car. You've got to ask yourself, how much work are you willing to put into something that should be a joy to drive? Sure, the interior has its unique quirks and charm, but it's also riddled with flaws that can make ownership a headache. So, is the interior of the 1960 Plymouth Fury a deal breaker? For me, a shoddy interior is a glaring red flag. Would you want to spend your time and money on something that feels more like a rolling disaster than a classic ride? All right, folks, let's talk about the engine of the 1960 Plymouth Fury, and oh boy, this is where the manufacturer really dropped the ball. You might think a car named Fury would pack a punch, but what you get is a half-hearted attempt at performance. The engine options are a mixed bag, and it's about as exciting as watching paint dry. First up, we have the B318 engine, which offers a displacement of 318 cubic inches. You'd expect something fierce with that kind of size, right? Well, prepare for disappointment because it churns out approximately 230 horsepower. What a pathetic horsepower figure for a car that could have been a contender. Now, if you want to step up your game, or at least try to, there's the RB361 Golden Commando. This bad boy boasts a displacement of 361 cubic inches and a more respectable horsepower of around 305. But let's be real here, that's still a far cry from the glory days of high-compression engines. Torque is where the RB361 shines, delivering a hefty 400 lb-ft, which might give you a moment of joy, but it doesn't make up for the overall mediocrity of the package. But hold on, it gets worse. If you really want to feel the sting of disappointment, let's talk about the RB383 Sonoramic Commando. With a displacement of 383 cubic inches, you'd think it would be the king of the hill, right? Wrong. Sure, it puts out approximately 330 horsepower, but it's not enough to redeem the reputation of this car. With a compression ratio that barely scratches 7.6 to 1, it's a clear indicator that the malaise era was creeping in. To put it bluntly, the engine options for the 1960 Plymouth Fury feel like a sad, watered-down version of what could have been. The excitement of the muscle car era was just around the corner, and yet here we are, stumbling through a swamp of underwhelming specs. The manufacturers had a chance to deliver something that would make the heart race, but instead, they gave us a lackluster offering that's more about cruising than conquering. Now, let's not forget the automatic transmission options that come with these engines. The car had a torque flight automatic, which, while decent, could never stack up to the legendary Turbo Hydromatic 400. There's no denying that the competition was out there, and the Fury just didn't bring its A-game. Overall, if you're looking for a car that embodies the spirit of American muscle, the 1960 Plymouth Fury is not it. You're better off saving your hard-earned cash for something that actually delivers on the promise of power and excitement. When it comes to the mechanics of the 1960 Plymouth Fury, the transmission is where the conversation gets heated. Now, if you want to talk about the best automatic transmission ever built, you can't skip over the Turbo Hydromatic 400. That piece of engineering is legendary, a titan of reliability and smoothness. But the Plymouth Fury? Well, it comes with the torque flight transmission, and let me tell you, it's a mixed bag. Sure, it was an innovative design for its time, with push-button controls on the dashboard that make it feel like you're piloting a spaceship, but the reality is, you're trading off the bulletproof nature of the Turbo Hydromatic for something that can be downright finicky, especially when it comes to the electrical issues plaguing those push-button systems. You can easily find yourself in a situation where the transmission acts like a moody teenager. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now let's talk about those rear axle ratios. You've got options like 3.23 to 1, 3.55 to 1, and even 3.91 to 1 for the performance enthusiasts out there. The problem is, the performance doesn't really live up to the hype. Sure, you can choose the higher ratios for a bit of a thrill, but when you've got a car that's already struggling with underwhelming horsepower, around 190 at best, it's like throwing a party and forgetting to invite any guests. The handling of this beast? It used to be better. Cars from the mid-60s to early 70s had a certain finesse, a responsiveness that this model simply lacks. And don't even get me started on the common mechanical weak points. Early wear in ball joints and front suspension components can turn your classic ride into a money pit faster than you can say, "What were they thinking?" The cooling system? It was often inadequate for the V8 models, leaving you with a car that could overheat just when you need it to perform. In the end, while the torque flight transmission tries to offer some semblance of innovation, it simply can't compete with the reliability of the Turbo Hydromatic 400. The rear axle options might sound nice, but they won't save you from the reality that this is a car birthed during the malaise era, where performance and engineering took a nosedive. So ask yourself, is this the kind of mechanical compromise you're willing to live with? For me, it's a hard pass. All right, buckle up because we're diving into the suspension, brakes, and handling of the 1960 Plymouth Fury, an area that can only be described as a combination of nostalgia and disappointment. First off, let's get one thing straight. The suspension on this beast isn't exactly a masterpiece of engineering. The mid-century American dream was to cruise comfortably down the boulevard, but the reality here is pretty dreadful. The Fury was equipped with a conventional front suspension using torsion bars, which might sound fancy, but don't let that fool you. The ride can feel more like a pogo stick than a smooth glide, particularly on those potholed roads we all know too well. Now, about the rear suspension. It's a live axle with leaf springs, which means you're going to get a ride that's about as forgiving as a brick wall. Sure, it can handle the power if you've got the 383 CID Sonoramic Commando under the hood, but don't expect it to take corners like a sports car. In fact, cars from the mid-60s to early 70s handled much, much better than this. You might as well be driving a boat in choppy waters when you try to take a corner. What were they thinking? And then we come to the brakes. Oh boy, the brakes. For a car of this size and power, the stopping ability is woefully inadequate. The Fury is packing drum brakes all around, which is like trying to stop a freight train with a stick. You can forget about impressive stopping distances or any kind of confidence when you need to slam on those brakes. My biggest issue has always been the brakes, and in this case, they're a massive letdown. If you're planning on driving this classic beauty, you better be prepared for some serious brake fade, especially if you think you can drive it like you mean it. Let's not forget about the steering. The steering feel is as vague as a politician's promise. You're left wondering if you're even connected to the wheels half the time. It's a classic case of what you see is not what you get. You turn the wheel, and it takes a moment for the car to respond, leading to that unsettling feeling that you're just along for the ride instead of in control. In summary, the suspension and braking system on the 1960 Plymouth Fury is a classic example of how far we've come in automotive engineering. If you're looking for a car that handles well and stops on a dime, you might want to keep looking. But if you're into that brutal charm and the unapologetic character of this heavy iron, maybe you can overlook its shortcomings. Just don't say I didn't warn you. When it comes to the reliability of the 1960 Plymouth Fury, the truth is that this car is a mixed bag and not in a good way. Sure, it has that classic charm and those iconic tailfins that can make anyone weak in the knees, but underneath that glossy exterior lies a plethora of issues that are enough to make you reconsider your purchase. The common rust spots are practically a rite of passage for this model. You can bet your last dollar that if you find one of these beauties, you're going to have to deal with rust on the front fenders, the lower sections of the doors, along the rocker panels, and heaven forbid, the trunk floor. If you think you can ignore that, think again. Rust is a relentless enemy that will eat away at your investment faster than you can say malaise era. Now let's talk about the electrical issues. The push-button transmission controls might seem like a nifty little feature, but trust me, they can become a nightmare. Dashboard wiring problems? Yeah, good luck trying to sort that mess out. And don't even get me started on the mechanical weak points. The early wear in ball joints and front suspension components is a serious concern. The cooling system is sometimes inadequate for those V8 models, which is a major red flag if you plan to take this car out for more than just a Sunday drive. So, what's the verdict? If you're looking for a reliable classic car that can stand the test of time, the 1960 Plymouth Fury might not be your best bet. But here's the kicker. If you find one in decent condition, despite its flaws, and the price is right, go for it. It's only original once, and this car has a brutal charm that's hard to replicate. Just be prepared to roll up your sleeves and dive into some restoration work. In the end, it's about what you want. Do Do you want a car that's going to give you headaches, or do you want a piece of automotive history that's got character? For those willing to embrace its quirks and flaws, the Plymouth Fury can offer a unique driving experience that's like no other. So, would you spend your money on this? If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like. Leave your comments and impressions. Your opinion is very important to me. Until next time.